G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. I'm here to talk to you this time about the Leviathan hypothesis, local government, and COVID. Those of you who remember your Judeo-Christian Bible remember that Leviathan was the feared sea monster that was said to be able to bring the haughty and proud, cut them back down to earth. Leviathan also in the economic literature is a metaphor for a government which gets out of control, who takes on monstrous proportions, which destroys human dignity. Recall that human dignity is your right to pursue your existential ends without undue interference. And I think we've all seen through COVID that government really can take on these monstrous proportions and destroy your human dignity. And in fact, that was an idea known to the ancients. I read now from Josephus Flavius, the Roman historian, his reply when people asked for government. This is what he said government would do. They will use their subjects as beasts according to the violence of their own wills and inclinations and other passions, as wholly carried away with the lust of power. Now, Leviathan idea was used, and the word was used to coin the Leviathan hypothesis by the great political economist James Buchanan. And he said that unless we took strict measures, that government would grow in power and competence, and government would more and more impact on your human dignity, your right to be free and at liberty. And he had two solutions for that. One solution was decentralized government, which I'll talk about in this video. The other was fiscal constitutions, which is a topic for another video. So let's talk about decentralized government. The advantage of decentralized government is two. There's exit and voice in Hirschman's terms. So let's look first at exit. If you have lots of decentralized government and you're not happy with government policy, you're not happy with what government's doing to you, if they're trying to destroy your human dignity, you have a greater potential and opportunity to simply leave and get yourself out of that bad situation. It's much harder to leave the country. It's much easier to leave a local government. So that's one way that decentralized government helps to constrain Leviathan, because there's this implicit threat that if you treat your citizens too harshly, they'll just leave. The second way is through voice, Hirschman term once again. In a decentralized government, you have a lot more potential to influence things. Think about Australia. My vote in federal elections, 1 out of 10 million or so. My vote in state elections, 1 vote out of 2 or 3 million votes. My vote really doesn't matter. My vote in a local government election, in this particular local government area, 1 vote out of 40,000, but often much, much less than that. So much more chance for your vote to do something, but also much more potential for you to influence policy through direct contact with politicians. I've got much more chance of meeting and being heard by my councillors, my mayor, my deputy mayor, than what I have by a premier. I'm never going to get to talk to a premier or a minister, and I'm certainly never going to get to talk to a prime minister or federal minister. So you have much more opportunity to deal with disagreeable situations, to be heard when you're not happy, when you have decentralized government. And this is why decentralized government is so important with respect to dealing with Leviathan. Now, as it turns out, we do have an awful lot of decentralized governments in Australia, over 500, and it provides us with some opportunities to escape Leviathan, but it's not as strong as the opportunities they have in other countries such as America, mainly because our local governments don't do as much of the things that we care passionately about. I don't know about you guys, but the things I mostly care about are education, policing, health. And in Australia, they're state government functions, and a lot of systems overseas, they're local government functions. And there's a good argument that if we want to escape Leviathan, if we want to be free of the threat of having our human dignity squashed and ravaged by this monster government, that we need local governments to be doing much more of those things that we care so much about. So that if we're not happy with things, we can influence it or we can leave. Now, it's particularly interesting in terms of COVID. COVID was a great example of Leviathan government. It was a great example of decentralised government at work too. Initially, there were national responses, and there was nowhere to go. If you didn't like the response, you were stuck. Then we had state level responses, and some people were able to flee across state borders before they were closed. But still, you had whole states being closed down when COVID cases were in Sydney, 400 kilometres away from me. Finally, the states realised that there were things called local government boundaries, and that we didn't have to shut down a whole state in order to control COVID. We could shut down a local government boundary, and most people know which local government they live in. And that was a much more efficient way of dealing with COVID. The pity of it all is that state governments didn't realise that not only do we have local government boundaries, we have local government politicians, we have mayors, deputy mayors and councillors who know their local communities. And if they had realised this earlier, some of the unworkable restrictions would have been much different. So the 5 kilometre travel restriction makes a lot of sense in the city. I imagine you can do all sorts of things within 5 kilometres. Out here in a rural area like me, 5 kilometres gets you nowhere. 30 kilometres to the closest shops for me. Obviously, I'd have to break that restriction. Same as the sewer testing. If they consulted with rural regional councils, they might have been made aware of the fact that the far majority of people aren't connected to the sewer system, so testing it's not going to tell you as much as you might like. Most of us have septic systems out here. So there's a lot to be said for decentralised government. There's a lot to be said for using decentralised government and using the people who lead decentralised government a lot more to get better tailored public policy and to avoid the harms that would be inflicted by Leviathan. In conclusion, Leviathan government is a real threat to human dignity. We all know that after COVID, our human dignity was completely not just eroded, completely destroyed for large periods of time. We had to get permission from the government to leave our house and things like this. So obviously, Leviathan is a real threat. And the political economy literature tells us if we want to avoid this threat of Leviathan, if we want to control and constrain Leviathan and stop it from growing and growing and growing till we have no dignity at all, well then a big part of the solution is decentralised government, and in particular local government. And I just hope that next time we have a public policy crisis, a big drama like COVID, that people remember that we do have decentralised government, and that mostly it will be more efficient and more effective to deliver things through decentralised government than through central government. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.